make some shelf space for more Mandalorian. Here's your look at the Diamond Select Premier Collection Star Wars The Mandalorian Beskar Armor 1/7 scale statue. His body is shielded by Beskar armor, his face hidden by a T-visored mask, and his past wrapped in mystery. No one is quite sure who this well-equipped stranger is. The Mandalorian is battle-worn and tight-lipped, a formidable bounty hunter in an increasingly dangerous galaxy. Designed, modeled, and prototyped using top-of-the-line 3D technology, this 1/7 scale statue represents the next in our new collection from the ongoing Star Wars saga. Each statue is hand-cast, hand-painted, and hand-numbered with a limited edition certificate of authenticity. May the Force be with you. Just before we get a closer look at the Mandalorian in his Beskar armor, let me first thank the folks over at Diamond Select, who took the time and provided this sample of the Mandalorian 1/7 scale statue that we can have a look at in this review. Following up to that, let's go ahead and grab the ruler, and factoring in, of course, the base, because the statue has to stand on something. You're looking at the Mandalorian standing about 11¼ inches in height, or about 28½ centimeters tall. Assembly for the statue is quite simple, as the Mandalorian in Beskar armor only comes with 3 parts. We're going to start putting things together in a second, but first of all, included inside the box, you'll be treated to a product catalog. And if ever there be a chance to have a look through a product catalog, you know I'm going to take it. Quickly skimming through this, you'll see some other offerings, not only Diamond Select, but also Gentle Giant Studios, some of which you may also already recognize as statues we've already had a look at here on this channel. Speaking of which, a shameless plug for the end of this video will be popping up a playlist where you'll be able to see the other Star Wars statues I've looked at for Gentle Giant and Diamond Select. But yeah, we have looked at a couple of these, covered off quite a lot of territory. I don't think I've had yet looked at this one. This is the Legends in 3 Dimensions. I love the Legends in 3 Dimensions line. It's one of my favorite things that Diamond Select is doing. But there is, in fact, a Mandalorian I don't think we've looked at here on this channel. And then on the back, just why you can join the guild, for example. A guild? A guild. Multiple tiers of membership, premier guild exclusive items, access to convention exclusives. Members get 5 to 15% off purchases. Members also get a $25 to $80 in coupons. Earn points for every dollar spent. Top tiers choose a free bust or statue. And you can find out more from going to www.gentlegiantlimited.com/premier-guild. Feel free to check that out. Also to come inside the box, of course, as well, is a certificate of authenticity. And while it may not look like a certificate of authenticity just yet, of course, it just only looks like a trading card. Flipping around onto the back is where you'll, in fact, get the number. This is 1760 out of the very, very limited run release of only 3,000 copies worldwide. I know you think to yourself, 3,000 copies worldwide. I'm not going to pull the trigger on getting this just yet, but you'd be surprised how 3,000 copies go like that. Hold on to this, of course, as well. That's crucial, especially if you're planning to keep this in your collection or later on selling this. Collectors are always looking for those certificate of authenticities. While we're certainly on the certificate and the numbered out of the 3,000 copies, also picking up a segueing off to the statue's base, you get yourself a sort of sandy terrain that the Mandalorian is going to be standing on top of. And just in case you're curious how he's going to be standing on top of it, 2 peg holes just off to the side, with also an impressed footprint that will sort of guide you on the idea of where that's supposed to be going. We're going to attach him in place just in a second, but flipping it upside down also as well. Not only is the bottom of the base treating you to 4 actually to be exact, somewhat of the corners, rubberized feet, preventing scratching on surfaces, and to also lift the base up from whatever surface you end up putting it on and sliding it back and forth. It also will prevent this from wearing away. Fancy that. It happens to be the same number. It is 1760 out of 3,000 copies worldwide. That's also presented always usually on the bottom of these bases. So that I can see again why they would have added the rubberized feet. Just again, so that that number isn't going to be wearing away on it, especially if you're going to be putting it on display and sliding the statue around. You really don't want to be sliding it around, but just in case you do, that number isn't going to get worn off in the process. For the time being, the Mandalorian is unarmed, figuratively and quite honestly literally, because that's one little bit of assembly that's also required when you get this out of the box. The arm, which has already got the blaster in its hands, are a separate piece that has to be attached via magnets. You can see that there's an interior magnet on the inside of the forearm, and then there's adjacent magnet on the end of his elbow. just line the two up and just use the force of the magnets to draw the two together. Now, whenever there's a chance for them to use magnets, I'm glad they take that opportunity. When it comes to things like limbs, for example, magnets are really the best way to go. It means that when you are putting this together, I mean, we really only have the one part to worry about. When it comes to the cases where you've got multiple limbs, like arms, forearms, hands, for example, or even if there's times where they can give you interchangeable hands and different blasters that the statue can wield, using magnets, again, a lot easier than having to go the route of pegs. There are still, yes, pegs on the statue, but you'll find them actually at the bottom of his feet, at least one of his foot. There's a longer post that's on the end of his heel and a slightly shorter post that's further up on his boot. Those are going to glide into the holes provided on the top of the display base. You may also notice that the statue is here and the display base is over here. The reasoning why I didn't put the two together just yet is because I know it would have added extra weight on the bottom of it. It makes things so much harder, I find, when being able to hold the statue, that I have to then worry about a display base also. So we're going to do that a little bit later. First of all, actually, let's look at the Mandalorian in his Beskar armor. One of my favorite looks, actually, for the Mandalorian is the Beskar armor. And to the credit of the way that they've painted this piece, even though really there is a lot of grays going on here, you'll see neighboring grays are quite different in colors and shades. Even like his mid-torso is very different than the higher end of his torso. Speaking of his torso, the torso armor, the shoulders, the gauntlets, and more importantly, his T-visor helmet are all painted a really nice silver. Now, I don't know if it's just my eyes playing tricks on me, but while looking at the silver, I feel like there's a slight purplish tint to it. You may also be able to see, being able to get it as close as I possibly can, that there's also a bit of a glitter effect that they've used for the paint. So it's not just a smooth paint either. There's some really interesting elements brought to that paint also. The T-visor, or at least the front of his helmet, is quite cleanly painted in a more shinier black. There really isn't a lot of black either on this. When you're looking at this, with the visor, with the glove, and really, that's about it. That's the only place that I can see there's really black on this. Again, there's a lot of real interesting grays that they've gone with here. Breakup of colors also appreciated, like his fingers are a bit, obviously a brighter color that they've went with. And there's all these little points of paint that you can also point out as well, like a little triangle of blue, a little bit of red there also in his gauntlet. That helps really to bring some necessary color to an otherwise very gray paleted Mandalorian. I do really like the colors that they went with here. He has, of course, his belt, and that's been nicely sculpted and painted. You can see it looks like there's a few little bits of ammunition there, a couple of pockets. Even like the front belt buckle looks like it's scuffed and even rusted a little bit. So everything on this looks quite worn. The blaster normally would have been able to pull out of his hand and fit holstered to the side of his leg. But the blaster, for obvious reasons, is going to be sculpted to the hand, but at least they actually did put the holster there. It doesn't look like they would have left it open. There is a little bit of a more concave way that they've sculpted it, but it looks like it's still solid a little bit further down from that. The browns look good. I especially like this little area here where there's a little bit of welded silver on top of it. That adds a lot of additional personality to the statue. Not to say that there isn't personality to start off with. Speaking of personality, actually, let's spin this around. You may not be able to see much of what's going on underneath the cape, but one thing that's interesting about the cape is the way they've got it swayed off to the side like this. It's got a really interesting mold to it, the way that they've got it kind of blowing off to the side, and a little touch to detail that I really appreciate. Now, this is really where they kind of hone in their painting skills, is if you look at the bottom of the cape, for example, normally this would have been draping lower, right? And then this would have been sitting on top of the display base. So you got to imagine, like the terrain that he's walking around, his cape is probably going to be picking up a lot of that. And you can see some really nice additional sanding that they've actually painted onto the bottom of it, where the sand, the wind, and the dirt and everything else would have started to build up on the bottom of the cape. That's a really nice, appreciated touch of detail I'm glad that they've included. It's got like a really cool looking pose to it, sort of like he's a gunslinger the way that they've actually posed the statue. And of course, to complete the look finally, let's get ourselves the display base. I find it's actually easier to pick up the base and sort of then guide in. The first post is the hardest to get in there. You sort of have to twist it back and forth. And once it gets far enough in there, you want to then make sure that the smaller post is lined up appropriately to that hole. You may even have to add a little bit of extra weight. There we go. It's that first post, like I said, it's just a little more stubborn, but once you get it far enough in there, you can then kind of push it down. And then from there, you can then put it down onto a display. There we go. And then guide everything back in. I think most people probably picking up this statue for themselves would likely display the Mandalorian probably posed straight forward like this, where I think the pose is most effective. But still, you know what? Looks just as good. maybe not as good, but it looks just as interesting to have it posed from the side, where you really then get the full effect of that blowing cape. Again, the paint on this guy is one of my favorite elements of it. It's got a great looking pose. It's got a great flow and energy to it. And it's got a lot of good, interesting paint, even though for really the Mandalorian, when it comes to his Beskar armor, let's go ahead and just spin this around. It is a lot of use of grays. There we go. It's a lot of using of the grays, but you can see the way that they've actually painted it. All the grays that are close to one another are very different, really, the way that they've painted them. That, like his mid-torso, for example, have more of a brownish kind of gray coloring. His lower torso has more of the darker gray coloring in his pants. And then you've got these interesting little elements of brown that they've sculpted in there. Something else I didn't even point out even in this review is he's also got the additional bullet casings further down on his leg guard. Again, all comes together and really brings in very interesting elements to an already interesting character. Here, the Star Wars Mandalorian in his Beskar armor is a really nice statue piece. It's a little bit weighted, of course, more so because it is a premier collection. It's going to be made of resin. So things that you will want to be careful of when displaying this guy on a shelf, for example, is his hand, his blaster, and more importantly, his cape. You really wouldn't want to have to break any one of those. But certainly, though, picking up this piece for your collection is going to be probably one of the more standout statues that you're going to have, especially if you're a big fan of the Mandalorian. The Star Wars Premier Collection, the Mandalorian Beskar Armor 1/7 scale statue, that's a mouthful. Might be one of my favorite Mandalorian pieces that Diamond Select Toys and Gentle Giant have put out in recent memory. I don't feel like I really have to plug the positive points. I'm sure those already interested to add the Mandalorian to their collection space shelf have already put aside the necessary bounty in order to procure one online. Now just keep in mind again, this 3,000 copies can diminish quite quickly if you're too late to the draw. This particular statue, again, if I was to say to the naysayers, or those on the fence as to whether they want to get this statue for their collection space, let me just sum things up by saying pose, paint, scale. That might seem a bit vague. Let me just break that down. Okay, pose. Really like the pose of this particular Mandalorian statue. I like that gunslinger pose that they posed him in. I like the flow of the cape behind it. Paint, something else. One thing that really works quite well to this particular statue is the way that they've painted it. To be fair, a lot of it is just matching, of course, the colors that he would have had in the series, but I do like the way that they've used different shades of gray. So even though there's a lot of gray happening here on the Mandalorian's suit, there's enough interesting elements going for it, even just like the armor and the plating alone, how it has that little bit of glittering that they've added to the paint. That's really nice. And of course, the scale. Now, if you're considering yourself a 1/6 scale snob, that means you're collecting only 1/6 scale figures and 1/6 scale statues of that scale. I think 1/7 scale is sort of in the somewhat close neighborhood to that this would still fit in really well with those that are only dedicating their collection space to 1/6 scale. Pose, paint, scale. Great looking piece though. I'd like to thank though the folks over at Diamond Select that did provide this sample, the Star Wars Mandalorian Beskar armor that we could have a look at in this review. What do you guys think of it? Let me know down below in the comments section. And hey, now if you are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, first of all, do yourself a service by subscribing. That's always crucial. Make sure as well you turn on the bell notification. That's good as well, because you get those friendly reminders whenever new videos are popping up. And then, yeah, at the very end of this video, popping up will be a playlist of all the other things I've looked at for Gentle Giant and Diamond Select. Feel free to give that again. In fact, all the things we looked at in the product catalog, I would say three quarters. I'm gonna ballpark 3/4 in that product catalog we've already looked at here on this channel. So if you did kind of think to yourself, oh, I'm kind of interested in that Luke Skywalker, it's on the channel. That's a plug. That's a shameless plug, but it's a plug nonetheless. Check out the playlist at the very end of this video. We're gonna have a lot more stuff coming your way. Star Wars stuff, statue stuff, Diamond Select stuff. So make sure, yes, you're keeping your peepers peeled to this channel. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.